Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to completely reframe how you think about the human digestive tract. Instead of just picturing it as some simple biological tube, I want you to treat it like a highly sophisticated, fully automated factory. And just like any massive industrial operation, this factory absolutely does not run on chaos. It's meticulously guided by chemical memos. We call these vital memos gastrointestinal, or GI hormones. By understanding the types, the sources, and the functions of these hormones, you're going to see exactly how your body coordinates the massive task of breaking down your meals.
To keep things perfectly organized, here's our roadmap for the journey today as we follow a meal through the system. We'll meet the digestive managers, check out the gastrin family, look at the secretin family, and wrap up with motilin and peptide YY.
Section 1. The digestive managers. Setting the stage. Let's dive right in and actually meet the floor managers of our digestive factory.
So, before we look at specific chemicals, what exactly is a GI hormone? Well, they are chemical messengers secreted directly by nerve endings and specialized glandular cells right there in the GI mucosa. These aren't just abstract, free-floating chemicals. They play a direct, absolutely crucial role in regulating the specific machinery of secretion. Which juices get pumped out, and motility, which is how fast the factory conveyor belt is actually moving.
We can group these hormones neatly into three distinct departments based on their structure and what they do. First up, we've got the gastrin family, which includes gastrin and cholecystokinin, or CCK. Then there's the secretin family, housing secretin itself right alongside VIP, GIP, and GLP. And finally, we have a really vital category of others, which encompasses specialized managers like somatostatin, motilin, and peptide YY.
Now, your intestine is definitely not just some uniform tube. It is lined with highly specialized glandular cells. Think of it kind of like a roll call of factory floor managers just waiting for their cue. G cells secrete gastrin. I cells are responsible for cholecystokinin. S cells release secretin. K cells pump out gastric inhibitory peptide. MA cells handle motilin, and D cells secrete somatostatin. Every single hormone has a very specific origin point, just waiting for the exact right signal to deploy.
Section 2. The gastrin family, starting the digestion engine. So let's say you've just taken a bite of food, swallowed, and it's arrived in the gastric antrum. It's time to start the heavy machinery.
Enter gastrin. Secreted by those G cells in the stomach's mucosa, gastrin literally turns the engine on. It commands the stimulation of gastric acid and pepsin to start chemically breaking down your food. It also stimulates gastric motility, revving up those mixing movements of the stomach. But what's super fascinating here is that it also stimulates the growth of the GI mucosa itself. So it isn't just running the factory, it's out there actively maintaining the factory walls.
But an automated factory needs precise sensors, right? Gastrin secretion ramps up due to the physical stretching of the stomach and the presence of food products like peptides and amino acids. It senses the food, so it turns on. Conversely, what turns it off? Acid. Once the stomach environment gets highly acidic or inhibitory hormones show up, gastrin secretion drops. It's this perfect built-in feedback loop preventing the stomach from totally over-acidifying.
So, that brings us to a crucial point. What happens next when that partially digested food, which is now basically a highly acidic paste, moves into the small intestine? Especially if you've just eaten something really heavy and fatty, like, say, a huge double cheeseburger.
Well, this is where the second member of the gastrin family steps up, cholecystokinin, or CCK. The I cells in the small intestine are constantly scanning that incoming food. While they do react to protein, their biggest trigger by far is the presence of long-chain fatty acids, specifically ones with more than 10 carbon atoms. Why does it care about those? Because complex long-chain fats require a massive amount of chemical effort to break down. When CCK detects them, it immediately rings the alarm.
And let me tell you, CCK's response is an absolute masterclass in multitasking. To handle that fact, CCK causes the gallbladder to contract and relaxes a vital valve called the sphincter of Oddi. This dumps bile into the intestine to emulsify the lipids. At the exact same time, it tells the pancreas to secrete a heavy enzyme-rich juice. But maybe most importantly, it inhibits gastric emptying. It essentially fires off a memo back to the stomach saying, "Whoa, hold on, we're busy down here with all this fat, slow down," while also increasing the motility of the small intestine to keep the current batch moving along.
Section 3. The secretin family, neutralizing the environment. Let's see how our next group of factory managers handles things.
Because while CCK is down there handling the heavy fats and proteins, there is a massive environmental hazard pouring into the small intestine that has to be dealt with right away. That hazard is stomach acid, which is literally strong enough to dissolve metal. Secreted by the S cells, secretin is the factory's primary emergency responder for pH levels. The absolute biggest stimulator for secretin is just the presence of acid in the duodenum. The delicate lining of your small intestine simply cannot handle that harsh stomach acid, so when secretin detects it, it has to act incredibly fast.
To neutralize that danger, secretin orders a massive flood of a very specific pancreatic fluid. Unlike CCK, which orders up enzyme-rich juice, secretin demands watery, alkaline fluid that is packed with bicarbonate. This bicarbonate completely neutralizes the acid. At the same time, secretin boosts CCK's actions, ramps up bile secretion, and smartly turns off gastrin. So it shuts down the acid-producing engine upstairs while putting out the acidic fire downstairs. Pretty brilliant, right?
Section 4. Motilin and peptide YY. The inner digestive brakes and sweepers. Let's examine that others category we mentioned earlier.
We know exactly what happens when food is present. The chemical managers are shouting orders, valves are opening up, fluids are pumping. But what happens on the factory floor when you're completely done eating? When the machinery is just empty?
The factory doesn't just shut off. It goes into a highly coordinated maintenance cycle. This resting phase is managed by motilin, secreted by the Mo cells. Motilin triggers what's known as the myoelectric complex, or MMC. Think of the MMC as the factory sweepers. Motilin literally causes organized contractions of the GI smooth muscle to sweep undigested debris and bacteria down the tract, keeping the conveyor belts totally clean and clear even while they're empty. But here's what's really wild about the timing of this manager. The exact moment you take another bite of food, the secretion of motilin is instantly suppressed. The sweepers are pulled completely off the floor the second new raw materials enter the system, and they aren't allowed back to work until digestion and absorption are fully complete.
Okay, let's look at one final scenario. What if a meal is incredibly rich, heavily loaded with carbs and fats, and it reaches the end of the intestinal line, the ileum, just a bit too fast? The body realizes it hasn't extracted all the value from the food yet, and it needs to hit the brakes.
Enter peptide YY. Stimulated heavily by the presence of fat arriving way too far down the tract, peptide YY, alongside another hormone called GLP-1, pulls what's perfectly known as the ileal brake. It literally slams the emergency brakes on the entire upper factory. It dramatically inhibits gastric and pancreatic secretion and motility, pausing the stomach and pancreas to give your lower intestine more time to absorb those complex nutrients before they're lost forever.
From gastrin jumpstarting the acid to secretin neutralizing it, CCK managing the heavy fats, peptide YY pulling the emergency brake, and motilin sweeping up the floors afterwards, the coordination is absolutely staggering. So as we wrap up this explainer, consider this. With hormones constantly monitoring, adapting, and even sweeping up between your meals, is your body's highly automated chemical factory ever really at rest? Think about that the next time you sit down for dinner. Thanks for learning with me today.